The wind cut across the Montana plains like a wounded coyote, sharp and full of warning. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Winter was coming early that year, 1847, and the land lay wide and gray beneath a sky the color of old pewter. Roxy Vale stood on the porch of her lonely cabin, watching the sun sink behind the jagged teeth of the mountains, staining the horizon with copper and blood. It had been 6 long months since they'd laid Saul Vale in the cold ground behind the barn, 6 months of broken fences, stubborn cattle, and empty nights filled with the cry of wolves. At first, the neighbors from Dust Creek had dropped by with food help and kind words, but the visits grew fewer as summer bled into fall. Folks in these parts knew a widow alone on a ranch was like a candle in a windstorm. Everyone figured it was just a matter of time before the light went out. Roxy drew her shawl tighter, rough wool scraping against her calloused hands. She was 32 but felt twice that some days. The frontier carved years into a person's face faster than grief ever could. Her once bright auburn hair was tied up tight in a no-nonsense bun, and fine lines had started to gather around her green eyes, proof of too many storms weathered alone. She was turning to head inside when she spotted 2 shapes coming down the ridge. Dark silhouettes against the dying light. Her hand went to the Winchester by the door. Travelers rarely came this far from Red Hollow, and when they did, it wasn't often for neighborly reasons. As the riders drew closer, she made out a man tall in the saddle shoulders, broad beneath a dust-stained duster, and a small figure clinging behind him. When they stopped at the gate, the man swung down, moving with the weariness of someone who'd ridden too many miles. "Ma'am," he called, voice steady but low, carrying across the chill yard. "Didn't mean to trouble you at this hour. Name's Jax Creed. Heard in town you might be needing a ranch hand." Roxy didn't lower the rifle, but she didn't raise it either. "And who told you that, old fella at the store? Silas Burke, I think was his name. Said the widow Vale was trying to hold her place alone. Said you were proud enough to die doing it, but maybe not too proud to take help if it came knocking. That sounded like Silas, all right, couldn't keep out of anyone's business if his life depended on it. And you just happened to be looking for work." Jax took off his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with early gray, and a face lined by wind, sun, and years. "Truth is, ma'am, my girl, and I've been riding near 3 weeks. Looking for somewhere to winter. I can mend fences, work cattle fix, near anything with 2 hands. Don't drink, don't gamble. You'd get honest work for fair pay." At that, the smaller figure slid down from the horse. A girl no older than 8 stood beside him, clutching a cloth doll, and blinking up with wide brown eyes too big for her thin face. The hem of her faded dress told a story of too many hand-me-downs. "Papa," she whispered, tugging at his coat. "I'm cold." Something twisted inside Roxy's chest. She thought of the silence that filled her house each night, the empty chair at her table, the ghost of setting 2 plates out of habit. "What's your daughter's name?" she asked softly. May, Jax said. "May Creed." Roxy studied them. The man's boots worn to the heel, his clothes patched but neat. The little girl clutching her doll like it was the only thing she owned. But it was their eyes that decided, her eyes that carried the same quiet loss she saw every morning in the mirror. "You can put your horses in the barn," she said finally. "Fresh hay's in the loft. When you're done, come on up to the house. I've got stew on the stove and it's too much for one person anyhow." Relief flickered across Jax's face, though he tried to hide it. "Much obliged, ma'am. Truly." Roxy watched them walk toward the barn, the girl's small hand locked in her father's. The wind kicked up again, chasing dry leaves across the yard like tiny bones. Winter was closing in, but for the first time since Saul's death, she didn't feel the familiar dread pressing in her chest. Inside the cabin felt different, as if the walls themselves were waking from a long sleep. She set out 3 bowls instead of 1, 3 spoons, 3 cups. The motions felt rusty, but right, like remembering an old tune you hadn't sung in years. Through the window she could see the warm glow of a lantern flickering inside the barn. The man worked carefully. She could tell he was the kind who knew first impressions mattered, especially when you had a child depending on you. As she stirred the stew, a memory came unbidden. 10 years ago, Saul Vale had knocked on her father's door, just the same hat in hand, asking for a chance. She'd watched from the stairs a wide-eyed girl of 15, mesmerized by his quiet strength. Now she stood on the other side of that same kind of door, holding the power to change someone's fate with a single word. The knock came sooner than she expected. When she opened it, Jax Creed and his daughter stood clean-faced on the porch, their clothes damp from the pump water. The girl's hair was freshly braided, her nervous hands clutching the doll. "Come in," Roxy said, stepping aside. "Warm yourselves by the fire." They entered cautiously. May's eyes widened as she took in the small but tidy room, the quilts her mother had made, the books Saul once kept on the shelf he built himself. "It's real pretty," May whispered, then looked up quickly at her father, as if afraid she'd spoken out of turn. "It's all right," Roxy said with a faint smile. "And thank you. Would you like to help me set the table?" The girl nodded eagerly, setting her doll on a chair before following her into the kitchen. And just like that, for the first time in months, the house didn't feel empty anymore. "It's all right," Roxy said softly, her voice carrying the kind of calm that made even the child's trembling hands still. "And thank you. Would you like to help me set the table?" May nodded quickly, placing her cloth doll carefully on a chair before following Roxy to the cupboard. Her small fingers trembled slightly as she carried the bowls, each one handled as if it were made of gold. Over supper, something shifted inside the cabin. The air filled with the sound of voices again, quiet but alive. Jax ate with the slow appreciation of a man who had known hunger, while May fought to keep her eyes open between bites. How long since her mother passed? Roxy asked quietly, glancing toward the drowsy child. 4 months. Jax replied, his tone rough. Fever took her. We had a small place out in Wyoming, but, well, staying put started to hurt worse than leaving. Roxy didn't press. She knew that kind of pain too well, the kind that left ghosts sitting at your supper table. "And you've been traveling ever since?" He nodded. "Working where we can. Harvest season helped a little, but most folks don't want to hire a man with a child in tow." His eyes softened as they flicked toward his daughter. "Can't say I blame them, but I couldn't leave her with strangers. Not after what we lost." The fire cracked in the hearth shadows, moving across the walls like restless spirits. Somewhere outside, a wolf, or maybe just the wind, let out a long, lonely cry. May stirred, whimpered softly. Without thinking, Roxy reached over and smoothed the girl's tangled hair. "There's a small room off the kitchen," she said, surprising even herself. "Used to be storage, but it's got a window and enough space for 2 bedrolls. If you're willing to stay. $30 a month plus board. You'll work for every penny." Jax's head came up fast. "You're offering us the job, I'm offering you a trial." Roxy corrected, her tone firm. 2 weeks to prove yourself. The land out here doesn't forgive mistakes. Mr. Creed. I've got 300 head of cattle, 20 horses, and winter breathing down my neck. I need someone who can work hard and work smart. You'll get both, he said simply. You have my word. They shook hands across the table, his rough, calloused palm meeting hers. A frontier contract sealed with nothing but grit and honor. May had fallen asleep by then, her head resting on her folded arms, the little cloth doll trapped beneath her cheek. "Let me—" Jax started to rise, but Roxy waved him back. "Finish your coffee. I'll show her to the room." She lifted the child easily, startled by how light she felt. May stirred, but didn't wake, her arms wrapping instinctively around Roxy's neck. That simple trust cracked something open in Roxy's chest, like thawing ice under spring sun. The small storage room had been swept clean that very morning, almost as if she'd known she'd need it. She laid May on the old feather mattress and pulled a quilt over her thin frame. In the lamplight, the girl looked even smaller, all sharp angles and hollow cheeks, proof of too many miles, too little food. When Roxy returned to the main room, Jax was standing by the fire, staring into the flames. "I'm grateful, Mrs. Vale." "More than you know." "Roxy," she corrected. "And keep your thanks until you see what this place expects from you. It's been fighting me every step since." She stopped herself, swallowing hard. He turned to face her, something gentle in his gaze. 6 months, he asked quietly. She nodded. "Gets easier," he said after a beat. "Not easy, just easier." They stood there for a moment, two people hollowed out by loss, bound by a grief that didn't need words. Jax cleared his throat and stepped back. "I'll turn in if that's all right. Want to get an early start tomorrow." "Sunup," Roxy replied. "I'll have breakfast ready by 5. He tipped his hat and disappeared into the small room. She heard him murmuring to May, tucking her in tighter, his voice low and tender. Alone again, Roxy banked the fire. Sleep felt far away. She stood at the window, staring out across the moonlit yard, the barn, the corrals, the open stretch of land that once felt like promise, but now felt like burden. Tomorrow would tell whether she'd made a wise choice or a foolish one. But tonight, for the first time in months, the house didn't echo with emptiness. Somewhere out there, a child slept safely, and a father kept watch. It wasn't her family. Maybe it never would be. But it was life's stubborn breathing, refusing to die under the weight of grief. The wind had quieted, and stars began to pierce through the thinning clouds. Roxy rested her hand against the cold window pane, thinking of Saul, wondering what he'd say if he could see her now. Then she turned away and readied herself for bed. Morning came too soon. The smell of coffee and frying bacon pulled Jax from sleep before dawn. For a moment he lay still, disoriented by the warm room and the sound of his daughter's soft breathing beside him. Then memory returned the widow's kindness, the hot meal, the promise of honest work. He rose carefully, not wanting to wake May, and pulled on his boots. In the main room, Roxy was already at the stove, her movements brisk and sure. She'd changed into a faded work dress and apron, her hair pinned neatly back. The table was set for 3. "Morning," she said, without turning. "Coffee's ready. Breakfast'll be done in a few." Jax poured a cup, inhaling the rich smell. "Real coffee. Haven't had that in months. Eat first," she said, glancing at him over her shoulder. "You'll need it. Your daughter's still sleeping." "Like a rock," he said with a faint smile. "First real bed she's had in weeks." Roxy nodded and turned back to the skillet. They worked in companionable silence until May appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her doll tucked under one arm. "Papa," she mumbled. "Right here, sunshine," Jax said, smiling for the first time in a long while. Jax crouched and opened his arms, and May bolted straight into them, burying her face in his shirt. "You hungry?" he asked gently. May nodded against his chest, then peeked shyly at Roxy. In the clean light of morning, the girl looked even thinner than she had the night before, her faded dress hanging loose on her small frame. "Good morning," May Roxy said softly. Would you like some milk with your breakfast? May's eyes widened. Real milk? Fresh from the cow this morning, Roxy replied. May looked up at her father for approval. When he nodded, she whispered, Yes, please, ma'am. They sat down to breakfast, bacon crisp from the pan, hot biscuits, and golden fried eggs. Jax ate with the quiet gratitude of a man who had known scarcity, while May's eyelids fluttered between bites fighting sleep. Roxy noticed the little girl carefully tucking half her biscuit into her pocket. There's plenty more, she said kindly. You don't need to save it. May blushed and lowered her eyes. Mama said never waste food. Your mama was right, Roxy said, her tone gentle. But there's a difference between not wasting and going hungry. Here you eat until you're full. After breakfast, Jax pulled on his coat. I'll start outside, ma'am. May's small hand tightened around his fingers. Where are you going, Papa? Just outside to help Mrs. Vale with the ranch, he said, bending down. You'll be able to see me through the window. Can't I come? Jax hesitated, but Roxy stepped in. The henhouse needs checking for eggs. Think you could help me with that, while your papa tends the horses? May bit her lip, torn between her father and her curiosity. Finally, she nodded. I can help, she said shyly. Outside, the morning was crisp and clean, the sun glinting off the frost that clung to the grass. Jax took in his first real look at the Vale Ranch, the barn's solid but weathered fence posts, leaning a gate, hanging crooked tools scattered where someone had left them months ago. It was clear the place was too much for one woman to manage, especially with winter closing in. I'll start with the corral fence, Jax told her. That far corner's about to give out. Roxy gave him a slow, assessing look. Tools are in the barn. You'll find what you need. They parted ways, Roxy leading May toward the henhouse, while Jax headed for the barn. From a distance, he heard May's delighted gasp when the first hen yielded a warm egg into her small hands. The day settled into rhythm. The swing of a hammer, the creak of wood, the soft cluck of hens. For the first time in months, Jax lost himself in steady, purposeful work. From time to time, he looked toward the yard, catching sight of May trailing after Roxy like a little shadow. Near noon, they met by the water pump. May's cheeks glowed with excitement, her dress smudged with dust. Papa, I collected 12 eggs, she burst out. And Mrs. Vale showed me how to feed the chickens. And there's a cat in the barn with kittens. Jax chuckled, ruffling her hair. Sounds like you've been busy, sunshine. It's been too long since I saw her smile like that, he thought. The gray tabby had her litter 2 weeks back, Roxy said. 5 kittens, all doing fine. Can I see them again after lunch? May asked eagerly. If your father says it's all right, Roxy said, smiling faintly. Jax nodded. Go on, sweetheart. Lunch was simple cold beef bread and preserves at the kitchen table. A map was spread beside Roxy's plate, marked with notes in tidy handwriting. The north pasture's best for wintering, she explained, tracing the area with her finger. Saul always said. She stopped abruptly. Your husband knew the land well, Jax said quietly. He did, Roxy replied, steadying her voice. Bought this place 8 years ago with nothing but grit and a dream. Built it up from scrub to what you see now. He'd be proud you're keeping it going, Jax said. Roxy's laugh was low bitter. Keeping it going, I'm barely keeping it alive. Half the town expects me to sell before first snow. Will you? Her eyes met his steady, unflinching. Not if I can help it. After lunch, May curled up on the hearthrug with one of the kittens Roxy had let her bring inside. The doll lay forgotten as she stroked the tiny creature, whispering secrets into its fur. Watching her, Roxy felt that old ache deepen in her chest. Does she remember her mother? She asked softly. Some days more than others, Jax answered, polishing a tool. That doll was May Crow's. Made it for her 4th birthday. She talks to it sometimes. Tells it things she can't tell me. Roxy nodded slowly. Children need their secrets. They do. He paused, then asked, Your husband were their children? Her answer came out sharper than she intended. No. We tried for years, but the land out here, it doesn't give up its blessings easily. I'm sorry, Jax murmured. Don't be. You can't mourn what never was. But her eyes lingered on May, and the truth glimmered there. She did mourn it. That afternoon, Jax found the barn's loft floor half-rotted, the coop door hanging loose, tool handles split with age. He made a mental list, deciding what needed fixing first. By sundown, the corral was repaired, the coop rehung, and his shoulders ached in a way that felt good. Honest work kind of tire. Supper felt warmer than breakfast. May talked freely now about kittens, chickens, and the blue curtains in the kitchen window. The shy girl from last night had been replaced by one full of wonder. Mrs. Roxy, she said suddenly, eyes bright. Do you know any stories? Roxy smiled faintly. What kind of stories Mama used to tell me about princes and castles? Roxy's gaze softened. Well, sweetheart, she said, leaning closer, out here, our castles are barns, and our princes ride horses instead of white stallions. May giggled, and for a brief golden moment the old cabin felt like home again. May's face dimmed for a moment. But I can't remember all of Mama's stories anymore, she whispered. Roxy thought for a beat, then smiled. Well, I don't know much about castles and princes, she said. But my grandma used to tell tales from the old frontier, back when this country was wilder than a bucking bronc. Want to hear how she once faced down a black bear with nothing but a rolling pin? May's eyes went wide. Really, really, Roxy said, lowering her voice. She was baking pies for a church supper when that bear came sniffing right through the kitchen door. As Roxy spun her tale, Jax watched them across the table. May hung on every word, gasping at the danger and giggling when Roxy mimed the woman chasing the bear out with flour still on her hands. It was the most he'd seen his daughter laugh since May Crow's passing. When the story ended, May yawned so wide her eyes watered. That was better than castles, she murmured. Time for bed, sunshine, Jax said. Will you tell another story tomorrow, Mrs. Roxy? If you'd like, Roxy replied warmly. As Jax carried his sleepy daughter toward their room, he heard her mumble. She's nice, Papa. Not mean like that lady at the boarding house. No, he said softly. She's not. When he returned, Roxy was clearing dishes. You've done enough today, she told him. Sit down. We should talk about tomorrow's work. They sat near the fire, and Roxy laid out what needed doing, bringing the cattle down from summer range, checking the winter feed, shoring up the barn before the snow hit. It's a lot, she admitted quietly. Maybe too much. It's doable, Jax countered. But you'll need more than one pair of hands come spring. This place could run a full crew. Could've, she corrected gently. When Saul was alive, we had plans. Doesn't matter now. I'll be lucky if I keep it standing through winter. Why stay? He asked. There must be easier places for a woman alone. Roxy stared into the flames. You ever build something with your own two hands, Mr. Creed? Pour your sweat, your blood, and your dreams into it. He nodded. I have. Then you know why I can't walk away. This land's got pieces of us in it, me and Saul both. Selling it would be like selling his grave. They sat quietly for a while, the fire snapping, wind scraping at the windows. Better turn in, Jax, said finally. Tomorrow will be a long day. Mr. Creed Jax. Jax, she repeated. Meeting his eyes. Thank you for the work, and for bringing laughter back into this house. Thank you, he said simply, for giving us a place to start over. Later, as he settled May into bed, Jax thought about the day. He'd worked bigger spreads and harder seasons, but something about this place, these two souls trying to rebuild something broken, felt different, fragile, precious, like the first green shoots after a cruel winter. Papa May mumbled sleepily, "Yes, sunshine. Do you think Mama can see us from heaven?" His throat tightened. "I'm sure she can." "Good," May sighed. "I want her to know we found a nice place with kittens and stories and everything." "I think she knows," Jax whispered. May's small hand reached out and rested on his arm as if to make sure he was still there. Soon her breathing evened out. Jax lay awake longer, listening to the sounds of the house, the crackle of the dying fire, the soft whisper of wind through the cottonwoods, the distant cry of coyotes. Through the thin wall, he heard Roxy moving, banking the fire, checking the locks, the quiet rhythm of a woman who'd ended too many days alone. But tonight was different. Tonight, the house held more than one lonely heart. It wasn't healing yet, but maybe the start of it. By frontier standards, that was miracle enough. The first week passed in a blur of work from sunup to sundown. Every morning, Jax woke before dawn to find coffee already brewing, and Roxy bent over her ledger, balancing costs and feed rations with the precision of someone who couldn't afford mistakes. He'd grown used to her quiet efficiency, her calm steadiness. But what surprised him most was her tenderness with May. The girl had bloomed under Roxy's care, following her from chore to chore, laughing again, curious again. "See how I hold the needle?" Roxy said one evening, showing May how to mend a torn apron. Small stitches close together. That's what keeps it strong. May's tongue peeked out as she concentrated, trying to copy the motion. "Like this." "Just like that," Roxy said with a proud grin. "You're a natural." Jax watched from the corner, pretending to oil a harness, while his heart swelled. May Crow had planned to teach their daughter these things, but sickness stole that chance. Now Roxy was filling that empty space without even realizing it. The next morning tested him for real. 300 head of cattle needed moving before the weather turned. Normally it'd take 4 men and half a week. "We'll have to do it in stages," Roxy said from horseback, scanning the ridge. "Groups of 50 or so." "I've got another idea," Jax said, adjusting his reins. "May's been riding since she could walk." "She's small," Jax said with a grin, tightening May's saddle strap, "but she knows her way around cattle." Roxy shot him a doubtful look. "She's just a child." "Out here, kids learn fast, or they don't make it," he said gently. "I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think she could handle it. She needs to feel useful, not just trail behind us." After a pause, Roxy nodded. "All right, if you say it's safe." When they told May, her eyes lit up brighter than a lantern at Christmas. "Really, Papa, I can help with the real work." "Real work means real responsibility," Jax warned with a grin. "You listen to every word Mrs. Vale and I say. Understand?" "Yes, Papa," she chirped. They saddled 3 horses. Roxy found an old youth saddle in the barn that fit May perfectly, and by sunrise they were riding out. The smell of morning sage hung in the cool air, and the sound of leather creaked in rhythm with gunpowder's steady stride. Jax felt that familiar pulse of life return the saddle under him, the vast blue sky, the wide-open quiet. This was the life he'd once built with May Crow, before fever stole it away. The cattle were scattered across the high meadow, fat from summer grass and lazy from too much sun. At Jax's call, they spread out. He took the left flank. Roxy rode the right, and May stayed between them, proud and focused. "Remember sunshine," Jax called over the wind, steady and calm. "The herd feels what you feel." What followed was a rhythm as old as the West itself. They moved slow at first, letting the herd adjust to their presence, then pressed, gently guiding the cattle down toward the valley. May proved herself quick, cutting off strays before they could bolt, her small frame poised in the saddle with natural instinct. "Your girl's got a gift," Roxy remarked, as they rested the horses near noon. "She gets it from her mama," Jax said softly. May Crow could gentle a wild stallion with nothing but her voice. By late afternoon, they'd brought more than half the herd down. May grew quieter as the sun dropped lower, her face streaked with dust, but she never complained, never asked to quit. "That's enough for today," Roxy finally said. "We'll bring the rest tomorrow." As they rode home, Jax noticed his daughter's small frame sway in the saddle. He moved his horse closer, ready to catch her, but she straightened, gripping the reins tighter. "Did I do good, Papa?" He smiled. "You did better than good. You worked like a true hand today." Roxy appeared with a tin cup of water. "Professional hands get paid," she said, pressing a silver dollar into May's palm. "Fair wages for fair work." May stared at the coin like it was made of starlight. "My very own dollar." "Your very own," Roxy said, smiling. "You earned it." That night, May could barely keep her eyes open at supper, still clutching her silver prize. Every few minutes, she pulled it out, admiring the glint in the lamplight. "What'll you do with your wages?" Roxy asked. "Save it," May answered instantly. "Papa says saving's important." Roxy's smile softened. "Smart girl. But sometimes it's good to buy something special, something just for you." Later, after May had been carried to bed, exhausted but happy, Jax found Roxy sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars spill across the sky. "You didn't have to pay her," he said, settling beside her. "Yes, I did," Roxy replied. "She worked as hard as any ranch hand I've hired, harder than some." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Girls need to know their worth, Jax. Too many grow up believing they're only as valuable as what someone gives them, not what they can earn." Jax nodded, studying her face in the firelight. "You sound like you learned that the hard way." Roxy's eyes flicked to the horizon. "My father was a good man, but old-fashioned. Thought teaching me to read was enough schooling for any woman. Saul taught me numbers and ledgers after we married. Said a rancher's wife should know the business, same as any man. Sounds like he was ahead of his time." "He was ahead of me," she said with a wistful smile. "I fought him at first. Thought he was judging my father. Took me a while to see he was just trying to make sure I'd never be helpless." Jax nodded quietly. "Good man." "The best," she said, voice tightening with memory. Then softer, "He'd have liked your daughter." Saul always said this place needed children's laughter. They fell silent, watching bats swoop through the dusk. Inside, the warm glow of the hearth flickered through the window, steady and comforting. It surprised Jax how easily they'd fallen into rhythm together. Chores, meals, stories, quiet evenings. Like a family. Almost. Over the next days, they finished driving the cattle down. May grew more confident with each ride, her silver dollar strung on a bit of twine around her neck, a small treasure tucked beneath her dress. One afternoon, while Jax repaired harnesses in the barn, laughter drifted from the house. Bright, genuine laughter. Both Roxy's and May's. He paused mid-swing, letting the sound soak into him. He hadn't heard May laugh like that since before May Crow's fever. When he stepped inside, flour dusted every surface, and both of them. Papa May cried. We're making bread, real bread, not hardtack. I can see that, Jax said, chuckling. Looks like the flowers win in the fight. Bread's a battle, Roxy declared solemnly, her cheek streaked with white. Sometimes you win, sometimes the dough does. She showed them how to knead May's small hands, pressing alongside her stronger ones. The air filled with the smell of yeast and warmth of life made simple again. And for a while Jax forgot the ache of loss, forgot the miles behind him, and the uncertainty ahead. That evening, as they sat at the table, butter melting on warm slices, May took a bite and sighed. This is the best bread ever. Roxy smiled. Because we made it together. And in that small golden moment, the house felt whole again. Things always taste better when you make them with folks you... May trailed off, glancing between her father and Roxy, cheeks turning pink. With folks you care about? Roxy finished softly. May smiled sleepily. Yeah, with folks you care about. Later that night, as Jax tucked her under the quilt, May blinked up at him. Papa, are we staying here forever? The question hit him like a slow bullet. I don't know, Sunshine. We're here for now. That's what matters. I want to stay, she said stubbornly. Mrs. Roxy needs us, and we need her too, don't we? Jax swallowed hard. Out of the mouths of babes, he thought. Sleep now, Sunshine. Big day tomorrow. But May wasn't finished. Papa, she whispered, do you think Mama would have liked Mrs. Roxy? His throat went tight. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she would have liked her very much. Good May murmured. 'Cause I like her too. She doesn't try to be Mama, but she's teaching me things Mama would have wanted me to learn. That's real good, Sunshine, Jax said softly. When he stepped back into the main room, Roxy was mending one of May's dresses by lantern light, her stitches neat and sure. She's growing fast, she said without looking up. Had to let the hem out again. Children do that, Jax said with a faint smile. Even when times are lean. He wanted to say thank you, but the word felt too small. In just a few weeks, this woman and her quiet strength had reminded him what home could feel like, what belonging might still mean. Roxy looked up, catching the struggle in his expression. I know, she said simply. I feel it too. What do we do about it? She gave a small shrug, eyes returning to her stitches. We take each day as it comes. Winter's setting in and there's work to be done. The rest'll sort itself out. Or it won't. Practical words, but her hands trembled just slightly on the fabric. Jax understood. They were both still healing, too careful to name hope out loud, yet something between them fragile as morning frost was taking root. I'll bring in more wood, he said, needing the motion to steady himself. Outside, the night stretched wide and wild. The stars burned bright over the Montana hills, and the cattle lowed softly in the near pasture. His daughter was safe inside, fed warm and learning under the care of a woman who had earned his deepest respect. It wasn't the life he'd planned with May Crow, but it was life again, and for the first time since her passing, that was enough. When Jax returned, Roxy had put aside her sewing and was writing in her ledger, the firelight soft on her face. She looked up as he stepped in. Something passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but the quiet recognition of possibility. Jax. She said his name soft but sure. It was the first time she'd used it without the stiff Mr. before it. I'm glad you knocked on my door that night. So am I, he said, meaning it to his bones. So am I. The morning Flint red arrived began like any other. Frost glazed the grass, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Jax was already in the barn mucking stalls while May scattered feed for the chickens. Roxy stepped onto the porch with her coffee and froze. 3 riders approached from the ridge, slow and deliberate, like men who wanted to be seen coming. "Jax," she called, keeping her voice even, though unease crawled up her spine. He emerged from the barn, pitchfork in hand, following her gaze. His jaw tightened. "May," he said quietly, "go inside. But Papa inside. Now." Something in his tone made her obey. She darted past Roxy, who touched the girl's shoulder gently before closing the door. The riders reined in just outside the fence. The leader was a big man with pale, cruel eyes and a scar that twisted his mouth into something like a sneer. His two companions looked like hired guns, the kind who enjoyed their work too much. Mrs. Vale, the scarred man, said, tipping his hat in mock politeness, "Name's Flint Red. I'm here representing Mr. Harlan Cross's interests." "I know who you are," Roxy said flatly. "State your business." Red's gaze slid toward Jax, who'd moved up beside her. "Hired yourself a new hand, I see. Bit soon after your husband's passing, ain't it?" "My employment arrangements are none of your concern," Roxy replied coolly. "Everything in this valley touches Mr. Cross's concern," Red drawled, dismounting. His men followed. "Especially when your cattle keep wandering onto his range. Found near a dozen head with your brand drinking at his water yesterday." "That's impossible," Roxy said sharply. "We moved every head to the lower pasture last week. You callin' me a liar, Mrs. Vale?" "She's saying you're mistaken," Jax cut in smoothly. "Easy enough to check. Why don't you show us these so-called strays?" Red's eyes narrowed. "And you are the hired hand," Jax said evenly. "Just like the lady said." The two men measured each other, and Roxy saw it something flicker behind Red's eyes. Not recognition exactly, but the awareness of another man who'd seen violence and walked away from it. "Cattle cross lines sometimes," Jax continued, calm but firm. "We'll check our fences and make it right. No harm done." "No harm," Red echoed, his grin crooked and mean. "Mr. Cross's patience is wearing thin. This makes the third time this year. He's starting to think maybe Mrs. Vale here can't manage such a big spread. Maybe she'd be better off selling to someone who can." "I'm not selling, Roxy," said voice steady as a drawn gun. Red's smile widened. "Winter's coming. Bad things happen out here. Cattle die. Barns burn. Terrible misfortune for a woman running things all alone." The air went cold. Jax's hand drifted near his hip, though he wore no pistol. "That sounds like a threat," Mr. Red, Roxy said. "Just speaking plain," Red replied lazily. "Mr. Cross would hate for anything unfortunate to happen to such a fine operation." His eyes flicked toward the house. "Especially with a little one inside. Dangerous country for children." Jax went very still. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but deadly. "You're right. Dangerous country indeed. Men disappear out here all the time, fall off their horses, lose themselves in snowstorms. Sometimes they just threaten the wrong people and vanish." Red's hand twitched toward his gun, but froze when Jax smiled. "Course," Jax went on lightly. "You're just here about cattle." "Neighborly concern. We appreciate that." His tone was easy, but his eyes were pure ice. "Tell Mr. Cross we'll check our fences. Any strays will be returned before sundown." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Red finally nodded, something almost like respect flickering in his pale eyes. "See that you do," he said. "Mr. Cross's generosity has limits." The men mounted up and turned to leave, but before they rode off, Flint Red glanced back over his shoulder, his cold stare locking on Jack's creed. And that look promised trouble wasn't done yet. "You look familiar, friend." We met before. Flint Red's pale eyes narrowed, his hand resting easy on his saddle horn. "Don't reckon so," Jack said evenly. "Just a drifter looking to earn his keep." "Funny." Red drawled, the corner of his mouth twisting. "You don't ride like a drifter." He turned his horse sharply. "Be seeing you, Creed." When the men disappeared over the ridge, Roxy realized her knees were shaking. Jax reached out, steadying her by the elbow, and guided her inside where May was waiting, worry written plain on her small face. "Who were they, Papa?" "Nobody important." "Sunshine," Jax said softly. "Why don't you go check on the kittens for me?" When the door closed behind her, Roxy slumped into a chair, her voice tight. "He threatened her, Jax. He threatened all of us." Jax poured 2 cups of coffee with steady hands, though the muscle in his jaw ticked. "Tell me about Harlan Cross." Roxy wrapped her fingers around the mug. "He owns the biggest ranch in the territory, 3,000 head, maybe more. Been swallowing smaller spreads for years, one way or another. Saul always said Cross was after water rights. We've got the only steady stream for 20 miles. And now that Saul's gone, he figures you're an easy mark. I've had offers. Seemed generous at first." She gestured toward the door. Then came the visits. Cut fences, cattle scattered. Nothing I could prove. Jax nodded slowly. Flint Red recognized something in me. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't always a ranch hand. Roxy watched him carefully, sensing the heaviness of what was coming. "I used to wear a badge," he said finally. "Deputy Marshal, Kansas Territory. I was good at it. Maybe too good." He stared into his coffee. "Made enemies. One of them came for me at home. May Crow was alone with the baby. She tried to get between them and the gun." His voice faltered. "By the time I got there—" "Oh, Jax," Roxy whispered. "I killed him. The man who shot her. Didn't feel a thing afterward, just empty. Turned in my badge that same day. Took May and left. Been running ever since. From the past, from what I was." Roxy reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You protected your family. There's no shame in that." His gaze met hers. Didn't protect them well enough. He turned his palm up, their fingers intertwining. "But I won't fail again. If Harlan Cross wants this land, he'll have to go through me." "This isn't your fight," she murmured. "Isn't it?" He countered, voice low but sure. May hadn't smiled in months before we came here. Now she laughs. She's learning growing being a child again. "You did that. You gave her something I couldn't. You think I'll let anyone threaten that?" Silence hung between them, hands clasped across the table, until Roxy finally whispered, "Then what do we do?" "First I check those fences like I promised. Then we get ready. Cross's kind never quit easy, but they test the ground first. Look for weakness." A grim smile touched his lips. "Lucky for us, I know how men like him think." They spent the rest of the day on horseback, tracing the property lines. Just as Jax suspected the fences were solid, no fresh cuts, no breaks. But they found tracks, horsemen driving a few head across the line and back again, just enough to fake a trespass. Clever Jax muttered. "Makes it look like we're careless." "Saul always said Cross had the patience of a spider," Roxy replied. "They mended a few weak spots anyway, more for show than need." Jax found himself watching her as they worked the sure way she handled a hammer, the easy control she had over gunpowder's reins. She'd been tempered by hardship, but not broken. That evening, May played in the barn with the creek kittens, while Jax sat cleaning his rifle, and the old Colt he'd found in a chest near the tack room, still in fine working order. "I hate this," Roxy said quietly from the doorway. "The waiting. The fear. Saul tried to keep it from me, but I always knew what kind of danger lived out here." "It's the way of the frontier," Jax said, without looking up. "The strong take from the weak, unless the weak get smart. Or mean." "Which are we?" Jax looked up at her sunlight fading behind her silhouette. "We're neither. We're ready." That night, Jax rolled out his bed in the main room between the door and the hallway that led to the bedrooms. If trouble came, it would hit him first. May sensed the unease no matter how they tried to hide it. "Papa?" she asked, wide-eyed. Are the bad men coming back? Maybe he admitted brushing her hair aside. But that's not your worry. Why not? Because that's my job. Yours is to sleep tight and dream good dreams. Will you protect Mrs. Roxy too? I'll protect everyone under this roof. May nodded, satisfied. Good. 'Cause I think she's our family now. Jax froze. From the hallway he heard Roxy's quiet intake of breath. What makes you say that, Sunshine? She takes care of us. We take care of her. That's what families do. Mama used to say hearts don't shrink. When you love more people, they grow. When May drifted off to sleep, Jax found Roxy by the window, tears shining in the lamplight. She's right, you know, Roxy whispered. Somewhere between that first night and now you both became part of me. Roxy. No, let me finish. Her voice trembled. I've been so afraid of betraying Saul's memory by moving on, but I think he'd hate seeing me alone more than anything. He used to say I had too much love in me for just one man. Jax crossed the room, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears. You and me were a matched set, both trying to learn how to live again after loss. Roxy looked up at him, the firelight catching in her eyes. Maybe he said softly, we figure it out together, even with Harlan Cross breathing down our necks. Out here, Jax murmured, his thumb brushing her cheek. Nothing worth having comes easy. Roxy leaned into his touch, her voice low and steady. Promise me something, Jax. Whatever happens, we protect May first. She's innocent in all this. He nodded without hesitation. I promise. But I'm protecting both of you, or I'll die trying. Don't you dare die, she said fiercely, her voice trembling. Don't you dare leave us now that we finally found you. He drew her close, and she came willingly fitting against him like she'd belonged there all along. Outside, the wind carried the scent of oncoming snow whispering through the cottonwoods, warning of the hard days waiting beyond the ridge. But for now, they were together, three hearts welded by loss, need, and stubborn frontier hope that refused to die. Whatever Harlan Cross sent their way, they'd meet it side by side. In the barn, one of the creek kittens mewed softly. Inside the house, May smiled in her sleep. And in the lamplight of the main room, two broken souls held each other, believing maybe for the first time that they'd found their way home. The next morning broke clear and cold sunlight flashing off the frost like shards of glass. 3 days had passed since Flint Red's unwelcome visit, 3 days of silent watchfulness. But Jax was ready to act. We're going after those strays that wandered up the canyon, he said over breakfast. All of us. May froze fork halfway to her mouth. Me too. Can't leave you here alone, Sunshine, he said with a grin. And we'll need every pair of hands. Roxy caught on quick. Keeping May close meant keeping her safe. I'll pack provisions, she said. It'll be a long ride. They saddled up after morning chores. 3 riders setting out across the vast Montana plain, gunpowder, leading the air crisp and sharp as river glass. May rode between them on her little mare, proud and straight-backed, her braids swinging beneath her hat. Jax couldn't help but notice how she'd started to mirror Roxy, her posture, her quiet confidence. Something deep inside him tightened at the sight. The canyon stretched before them, its stone walls rising high like a cathedral built by the wind. Beautiful, but dangerous. Too many blind turns, too many ridges for ambush. Stay close. Sunshine, Jax warned, as May's mare veered toward a patch of wildflowers. They found the cattle at last scattered near a hidden spring in a box canyon, grazing among the rocks. Roxy slid from her saddle and pointed at the ground. Fresh tracks. Maybe a dozen head. They followed the trail deeper until they saw them brands mixed. Some their own, others burned with the H-bar mark of Harlan Cross. Well now, Jax said dryly. Seems our herds got social. Or someone wanted 'em to. Roxy, replied, her tone dark. Make it look like we're stealing. They worked in practiced rhythm, separating the herds with patience and precision. May proved her worth again, darting her horse expertly to block the ones trying to bolt. She was learning fast, strong and capable, in a way that made Jax's chest ache with pride. When noon came, they stopped by the spring, spreading a blanket under a bluff of sandstone. The canyon walls held the warmth, trapping the sunlight. Tell me a story, Mrs. Roxy May said, her mouth full of biscuit. About when you were little. Roxy smiled faintly. When I was your age, I lived in Ohio. Flatland, nothing but cornfields. I used to dream about mountains and adventure. Is that why you came west, partly? Mostly because life has a way of leading us where we're meant to go. She glanced at Jax, a small, knowing smile curving her lips. Sometimes the best things happen when you aren't looking for them. Jax watched her as she spoke, the sunlight painting her hair gold, May listening wide-eyed. For a brief, perfect moment, the world felt gentle again. Papa's not listening, May said suddenly, giggling. I'm listening, Jax protested, chuckling. Just thinking, that's all. About what? About how lucky we are to be here right now. May nodded solemnly. Mama used to say that too. She said we gotta hold tight to the good times, they make the bad ones easier. She was a wise woman, Roxy said softly. May smiled up at her. She would have liked you. You both know about important things. Roxy's eyes glistened. I hope so, sweetheart. After lunch, they turned the herd toward home. It was slower work, the cattle restless from being driven, and the sun was already dipping low when Jax spotted a cloud of dust rising in the distance. Company, he said quietly. Take May and the herd into that draw. Stay low. Jax. Please, he cut in. Just till I know who it is. Roxy didn't argue. Come on, sweet pea, she said, keeping her voice steady. Let's water the horses while your papa scouts ahead. Jax climbed to higher ground, using a cluster of pines for cover. 5 riders came into view, neighbors, not hired guns. Relief loosened his chest when he recognized Clay Boone leading them. Boone had always been fair with Saul Vale, and he rode with men Jax knew by reputation. Boone spotted him and raised a hand. Creed. We were heading to your place. Glad we caught you first. What's wrong? Boone's face hardened. Some bastard strung barbed wire across Miller's Creek, right where the cattle trail cuts through. Cody Briggs's boy near killed his horse running into it last night. Jax swore under his breath. Barbed wire was fighting business out here, men had died over less. Had to be cross, he said grimly. No one else would have the guts. Figured the same Boone said. He's trying to choke off the water supply, force us to sell or starve out. Where's Mrs. Vale? Safe, Jax replied. We were rounding up strays. He gave a low whistle, their signal. Moments later, Roxy appeared from the draw, leading the herd, with May riding close beside her. The ranchers tipped their hats respectfully. Ma'am Boone said, Sorry to bring trouble, but this concerns us all. What affects one affects all, Roxy agreed. That's the code out here. The men nodded. By dusk, they decided to make camp together, too dark to ride for town. A rope corral was set for the cattle fires built, and soon the smell of coffee and beans filled the cool canyon air. Under the rising moon, the flicker of firelight caught on their weary faces. Neighbors bound by the same hard truth out here. Survival was never a one-man job. May, thrilled by the rare excitement of company, helped serve supper with both hands steady as stone. The men, rough and trail-worn though they were, softened around her, taking their tin plates with quiet thanks, and teasing her kindly about her steady pour. "Your girl's a natural ranch hand," Clay Boone remarked to Jax with a grin. "Saw her working cattle earlier. Reminded me of my own little one before she married and lit out east." The fire crackled between them, throwing long shadows across the canyon wall. Talk soon turned to the barbed wire strung across Hank Crow's creek. It wasn't just another nuisance from Harlan Cross. It was a shot fired straight at the open-range way of life. "We could cut it," one man muttered darkly. "Done it before when folks got greedy." Sure, another answered. "And give Cross the excuse he's waiting for to sick the law on us." "He wants that fight," Jack said, evenly, eyes fixed on the flames. "We make it cost him more than it's worth. Harlan's not a man of pride, he's a man of profit. Hit his pocket, he'll think twice." "How someone asked," Unity Jax replied. "We stand together. Share water rights, trade stock, fair pool supplies. Make sure his merchants can't choke us out one by one. When he pushes one of us, he's pushing all of us." Boone rubbed his jaw, thinking. Could work. But it'll take trust, and trust ain't cheap out here. "They'll get along better than they'll like losing their land," Roxy said firmly. Her voice was steady, her eyes catching the firelight. "Saul always said small ranchers needed to band together or be swallowed whole. Maybe it's time we listened." The discussion rolled late into the night, plans forming, alliances mending. May fell asleep against Roxy's shoulder, her little hands curled beneath her chin. Jax watched as Roxy tucked the child beneath a blanket, her touch instinctive, tender. "You've done well for yourself," Creed Boone said quietly. "The widow Vale's a fine woman, and that girl of yours looks at her like she hung the moon." Jax cleared his throat. I just work for her." Boone chuckled low. "Sure you do, and I'm the sheriff of heaven. Don't wait too long, friend. Good things don't stick around unless a man fights to keep 'em." One by one, the men rolled into their blankets. The fire sank to glowing embers. Jax remained on watch, Roxy beside him, May still sleeping peacefully against her side. "We should move her to her bedroll," he murmured. "Let her be," Roxy whispered. "She's safe like this. She was brave today, you've raised her well. I've just tried to keep her alive," Jax said quietly. "You've done more than that," she answered. "You've taught her how to live." They sat in silence, the desert wind whispering through the dry grass, coyotes calling somewhere far off. The horses shifted in their corral. The fire's light flickered across the canyon stone like fading prayer candles. "What you said about unity," Roxy murmured. "It might just work, but Harlan Cross won't take it sitting down." "No," Jax said. "He'll fight harder, but that just means we fight smarter." She looked at him across the dying fire. "Having something worth fighting for makes all the difference." Jax's eyes held hers, steady and warm. "Yeah, it sure does." May stirred, murmuring about angels and horses. Roxy brushed a curl from her forehead, whispering her back into dreams. Watching them, Jax felt that same ache of possibility of belonging. A future he'd buried long ago was daring to breathe again. Tomorrow they'd head back to the Vale Ranch. They'd start organizing the others, drawing up papers, strengthening fences, preparing for whatever Cross planned next. Trouble was coming. No question. But tonight, they had peace. The fire popped softly, sparks spiraling into the night like tiny prayers. Somewhere out in the dark, a night bird called, and its mate answered. Jax listened to the echo, and thought even in the loneliest places no one had to stand alone. "I should wake Boone for his watch," he said finally. In a minute, Roxy whispered, still stroking May's hair. "Let's just stay here a little longer." So they did, 3 souls framed in firelight, bound by loss, by hope, and by the fierce will to protect what they'd found in one another. Tomorrow would bring its trials, but for now they had warmth and quiet and the fragile certainty that whatever came, they'd face it together. Jax awoke to the sharp, acrid bite of smoke. For a heartbeat, he thought it was just the campfire. Then came the terrified bellow of cattle, the panicked whinny of horses, and the unmistakable crackle of flames feeding on dry wood. Fire. He was on his feet before thought caught up, pulling on his boots and coat in one motion. "Roxy!" he shouted, bursting through the doorway. "The barn's on fire." She appeared already dressed, pale but steady. "May, I'll get her. You start the buckets." But May was already in the doorway, clutching her doll eyes wide with fear. "Papa, what's happening?" "Stay with Mrs. Roxy. Sunshine. Do exactly what she tells you." He grabbed his rifle, though it was useless against flame. No matter what, stay with her. Outside, the sky glowed orange. The barn's west wall was already a sheet of fire flames roaring upward, feeding on hay and timber. The terrified shrieks of horses cut through the wind. The horses, first Roxy, called over the noise. She'd already formed a bucket line from the well, though both knew water wouldn't win this fight. Jax ran headlong into the inferno. The heat hit like a hammer, scorching his lungs with each breath. He shoved open the first stall. Gunpowder bolted past him, wild-eyed, but free. Another horse screamed. Jax ducked through the smoke, kicking open the next door. He didn't stop, not until every stall stood empty, and the world behind him burned bright as judgment. The freed horses bolted into the dark, their hooves pounding the frozen ground. Jax counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3... Then his stomach dropped. "Where's the fourth?" Through the black smoke, he spotted her. May's gentle mare. Gunpowder trapped at the far wall, trembling in panic. Jax grabbed a blanket, flung it over the horse's head, and guided her out, choking on the smoke that clawed at his throat. Papa May's cry tore through the chaos. Gunpowder's safe, baby. She's safe. He shoved the reins into her hands before spinning back toward the inferno. The barn's roof groaned, raining down burning debris. The heat was savage, swallowing oxygen, turning wood to ash in seconds. There was no saving it now, but if they could keep the flames from reaching the house. The cattle. Roxy's voice rang out. She pointed toward the corral, where the frightened herd had smashed through the fencing. Some ran headlong toward the fire, blinded by panic. Together they fought to turn the stampede, waving coats and shouting, driving the animals toward open ground. It was dangerous, brutal work, 800 pounds of terror in motion. Twice Jax had to yank Roxy clear as the cattle thundered past so close their breath burned his arm. When the last of the herd stumbled away from the flames, the barn was gone. They stood panting in the flickering glow, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. May pressed against Jax's side, tears carving clean lines down her dirty cheeks. "My kittens," she whispered hoarsely. "The creek kittens were in there." Roxy knelt, gathering the child into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." When dawn finally came, the light revealed the full ruin, blackened timbers, twisted iron, the ground still warm beneath their boots. The barn, their feed, their tack, nearly everything was gone. A dozen cattle were missing. Several more lay injured in the frost. Jax walked the perimeter, jaw tight. The tracks told the story, boot prints, not hooves, and half-burned torches in the dirt. "This wasn't lightning," he said flatly. "Harlan Cross's men?" Roxy asked, coming to stand beside him. No question. He kicked the charred remains of a torch toward her. "And they wanted us to see it." Her eyes hardened. "Then we rebuild bigger and stronger." With what he asked quietly. "Winter's nearly here, Roxy. No feed, no shelter. She swallowed. We'll find a way. But her voice trembled. They both knew what the loss meant. By midday, smoke still rose from the ruins, and with it came riders. The Dust Creek folks drawn by the column of ash on the horizon. Clay Boone was the first to dismount, his face grave, as he surveyed the wreckage. This changes everything, he said grimly. Burning out a widow and her little girl. Even Cross ought to know that's a line you don't cross. Roxy gave a bitter laugh. Doesn't bring my barn back. No, Boone agreed. But it means you ain't standing alone. He turned to the growing crowd. You all see this. If they'll burn out the Vale Ranch, they'll come for the rest of us next. I say it's time we stop talking and start acting. A murmur spread through the group, tough men and women hardened by drought blizzards and outlaws. They understood what was at stake. My boys'll help you round up the strays, one man said. I got some feed stashed, another offered. Not much, but enough to get you started. Boone nodded. We'll raise you a new barn, Roxy. All of us. Let Cross Sea burn one of us down and we rise higher together. For the first time since the fire, Roxy's composure cracked. Tears welled and slipped down her sooty cheeks. Thank you, all of you. While the men formed search parties, Jax spotted May sitting alone at the edge of the ashes, clutching her doll. He went to her kneeling in the dirt. I know it hurts, Sunshine, he said softly. Losing the kittens. It's not fair. Her voice was small. They were just babies. They never hurt anyone. No, they didn't, he said, wrapping her close. But bad men do bad things to scare good folks. Will they come back? Will they burn our house too? He held her tighter. Not if I can help it. You can't stay awake forever, Papa, she whispered. Even cowboys need sleep. Her truth struck deep. One man couldn't protect everything, but maybe a town could. That evening, as the sun bled behind the hills, wagons began rolling in neighbors bringing lumber ropes, shovels. The women came with baskets of food, the men with tools and resolve. By nightfall, the yard flickered with lantern light and the hum of voices. We start at first light, Boone called out. Frame first, then walls. We'll have it standing in 2 days. Roxy stood before them, her voice catching. I don't have words enough, no thanks needed, said an older woman firmly. Today it's your barn. Tomorrow it might be ours. Out here we survive together or not at all. As the camp settled, guards took shifts through the night rifles across their knees. The message to Harlan Cross was written in the glow of every fire the small ranchers wouldn't break. Roxy joined Jax near the embers, handing him a tin cup of coffee. I've never seen anything like this, she said quietly. All these people coming together. It's what Saul dreamed of, Jax said. Neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder. He'd be proud of you. She looked at him, eyes shimmering in the firelight. He would have liked you, Jax Creed. Respected the man you've become. He met her gaze steadily, the fire reflecting between them like a promise. Then I reckon I'll do everything I can to earn that respect. I'm just trying to keep us safe, Jax said quietly, watching the flicker of the fire on Roxy's face. She shook her head slowly. No, Jax. It's more than that. You've given them hope. You showed everyone they don't have to bow to men like Harlan Cross. Her voice softened, almost trembling. You've given me hope, too. Before he could answer, a sharp cry came from one of the guards. Riders coming in! Jax was on his feet in an instant, rifle raised, scanning the dark. But when the group rode into the circle of firelight, he saw familiar faces. Not the Iron Riders. It was Reverend Gage from town, still wearing his marshal's star, and 2 deputies at his flank. The lawman's face, carved by weather and years, was unreadable as his eyes swept over the camp, the charred barn, the armed men, the smoke still curling up from the ruins. Mrs. Vale he greeted, tipping his hat. "Heard you had some trouble." "Our barn was burned down," Roxy said flatly. The marshal nodded slowly. "That's a serious accusation. You have proof torches and boot tracks," Jax replied, "leading straight off the Vale property." The marshal studied him a long moment. "You're Creed, right? Heard you used to wear a badge yourself." "I did," Jax said evenly. "Now I just wear dust and work for wages." Reverend Gage dismounted his deputies following. "I'll have to investigate. Can't have folks taking the law into their own hands. That cuts both ways. The warning was plain as day: keep things lawful or face his authority. Yet beneath that gruff neutrality, Jax caught something else, a hint that the marshal wasn't entirely in Harlan Cross's pocket. "We're just rebuilding a barn," Clay Boone said from the fire line. "Ain't a crime in neighbors lending a hand." "No, it ain't," the marshal agreed, his gaze drifting over the assembled men. "Just remember, the law's the law. I enforce it equal on both sides. Don't give me reason to forget it." "Understood." A rumble of assent passed through the ranchers. Everyone knew what he meant. Stay legal, stay smart. Give the law no excuse to step in. Before leaving, the marshal paused beside Jax. "Heard you were quick with a gun back in Kansas." "I was good at keeping peace," Jax said. "Still am." "Then make sure you remember the peace part," Gage murmured. "Cross has deep pockets and longer reach than most, but this land still answers to law, and when that law fails, we're all just beasts fighting for scraps." When the marshal rode off, the air around the camp settled again, heavy with unspoken resolve. The battle lines were drawn clear now. By morning, they'd raise a barn, not just to replace what they'd lost, but to make a stand. That night, May slept in Roxy's bed, her small face streaked with ash and tears. Jax stood in the doorway, brushing a lock of hair from her brow. "She's already lost so much," Roxy whispered behind him. "If anything ever happened to her—" "Nothing will," he said fiercely. "Not while I draw breath." Roxy hesitated. "She's become like my own. I hope that doesn't overstep." He turned, eyes softening. "Roxy, you could never overstep. You've given her what I couldn't, a mother's love. I see it every day." He paused. "And you've given me something, too. A reason to fight for more than just land and survival." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then we fight together. The three of us." Jax reached for her, and she stepped into his arms. The kiss they shared was gentle, but certain, a promise made in the quiet language of the frontier. When they parted, her eyes shimmered with tears. "We'll rebuild," she vowed. "The barn, the herd, all of it. And Harlan Cross will learn there are some things you can't burn out of people." Outside, the guards stood their watch, while the rest of the valley slept beneath 1,000 cold stars. Tomorrow, hammers would rise, saws would sing, and from the ashes of loss, a community would stand taller than before. 3 days later, a new barn stood golden against the evening sky, fresh-cut timber gleaming in the sunset. It was sturdier, broader, and prouder than the one before it. As the last of the Dust Creek folks packed their wagons, each family promised to take turns watching over the valley. Wordless pacts were made by men whose calloused hands had built more than walls, they'd built unity. 2 weeks of uneasy calm followed. The cattle were rounded up, the winter stores replaced. Life returned to a tense sort of peace. But Jax knew it wouldn't last. Harlan Cross had gone quiet, and quiet men like him only went still when they were plotting. The trap sprang on a moonless night in late October. Jax woke to the sound of hooves too many, moving too slow to be friendly. He rolled from his bedroll in the main room, loaded his rifle, and crossed to Roxy's door. "They're here," he whispered. Get May to the root cellar. Roxy was awake instantly, every inch the frontier woman Saul Vale had raised her to be. No panic, no hesitation. Just swift, sure motion as she roused the girl. Jax crouched by the window and counted shadows. 8 riders fanning out, forming a half circle around the house. Vale, a voice bellowed from the dark flint reds. "We know you're in there. Come out nice and peaceable and nobody gets hurt. State your business," Red Jax called back, rifle leveled. "Got a warrant, says you've been rustling cross cattle marshal once you brought in for questioning." Jax laughed grimly. In the dead of night with 8 armed men, try again. Can't blame a man for hoping you'd choose the easy way, Red drawled. "But one way or another, you're coming out." Roxy appeared at his shoulder. "May's safe," she whispered. "What's the plan?" "They want me, not you. I go out, draw them off." "Absolutely not," she snapped. "We stand together." Before he could argue, the night filled with another sound, more riders coming fast. Red's men stiffened, uneasy. Then Clay Boone's booming voice cut through the dark. "Evening, Flint. Bit late for a social call, ain't it?" Jax peered out and saw at least a dozen riders cresting the hill, the Dust Creek folks answering the signal. At their head rode Reverend Gage Badge, glinting beneath the lantern light. "This here's lawful business, Boone," Red growled. "Ain't your concern." "That's where you're wrong," Boone said evenly. "Roxy Vale's our neighbor. That makes it everyone's concern." The marshal urged his horse forward. "You mentioned a warrant, Red. Mind letting me see it?" "Don't have it on me," Red said, his tone tightening. "Left it back in town." "Funny," the marshal replied coolly. "I'm the only man in this territory who can issue one, and I don't recall signing any paper with your name on it." His hand rested near his holster. "Looks to me like you're trespassing, threatening good folks, disturbing the peace." The air crackled. Horses shifted. Fingers twitched near triggers. "That's jail time," Flint the marshal said, his voice dropping like cold iron. The standoff stretched taut as a wire in the wind. Flint Red's men froze, glancing toward their leader. Fingers brushed against holsters, boots shifted in the dust. Across the yard, the Dust Creek folks mirrored the motion hands steady near their guns. The air was so tight with tension, one wrong breath could have started a war. "Mr. Cross won't take kindly to this," Red finally said, voice low and venomous. "Mr. Cross can take it up with me," Reverend Gage replied, his tone iron flat. "Now move along, all of you. And Pike, next time you claim to have a warrant, make sure you're not lying through your teeth." For a long heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Red wheeled his horse around hard gravel, scattering beneath the hooves. "This isn't over, Creed. Not by a damn sight." They thundered off into the darkness, but everyone watching knew the truth. They'd be back. The neighbors stayed through the night, setting up a loose perimeter around the Vale property. Lanterns flickered like watchfires along the fences. Reverend Gage lingered at the porch, accepting a cup of coffee from Roxy. "I can't stay here every night," he admitted quietly. "And Cross has friends higher up the ladder than most of us can reach. Sooner or later he'll find a way to strike at you through the law." "Then we'll face him head-on, when he does," Jax said. "There might be another way," Gage replied, studying the coffee swirling in his tin cup. "Cross built his empire on lies and intimidation. A man like that always leaves a trail paper, witnesses, bribes. The kind of thing that might interest the territorial governor or the federal marshals if it came to light." Roxy leaned forward. "What kind of trail are we talking about? The kind that needs collecting by someone who knows what he's doing," Gage said pointedly, his eyes cutting toward Jax. "I'm just a ranch hand now," Jax answered. "Sure you are," the marshal said dryly. "And I'm just a preacher who didn't notice 8 armed men trying to kidnap a mother and child." He drained the last of his coffee and set the cup down. "Think on it, Creed," Sometimes the only way to end a range war is to win it quick and win it legal. After he left, Jax found Roxy already watching him from the porch rail. "He's right," she said. "We can't just keep reacting. If we don't strike first, we'll never get ahead of Cross." "It's dangerous," Jax said. "If I start digging into Cross's affairs, it'll paint a target on us all." "It's already there," she replied. "At least this way we aim back." A small voice came from the doorway. "Are the bad men gone?" May asked sleepily, her hair tousled. "For now, Sunshine," Jax said, scooping her into his arms. "But Mrs. Roxy and I were just talking about how to make sure they don't come back." "Good," May mumbled. "I don't want to hide in that dark cellar again. Smells like turnips." Despite everything, they both laughed, a brittle, kneaded sound that broke the heaviness for a moment. Over the next few days, their plan took shape. Using old lawman contacts, Jax began digging quietly into Harlan Cross's operations, his land claims, freight contracts, and the suspicious disappearances that trailed his business like smoke. Clay Boone and the other ranchers provided cover staging roundups and fence repairs to mask his movements. The breakthrough came from an unexpected ally. Buck Holler, a former crosshand, approached them outside Silas Burke's store. He kept his hat low, his voice lower. "Heard you're standing up to the old man," he said. "About damn time someone did." "Why come to us?" Roxy asked, wary. "Because Cross had my brother killed," Buck said bluntly. "Said it was a riding accident, but Miguel was fixin' to testify about the land schemes Cross has been running. He kept notes." Buck pulled a worn leather notebook from inside his coat. Dates, names, payoffs, fake claims, proof of everything. Jax flipped through it, jaw tight. "Why didn't you bring this to the marshal?" "You think Cross only bought off Red?" Buck asked bitterly. "Half the circuit judges owe him favors. But that marshal, he's different. And now that the Dust Creek folks are standing together, maybe the tide's turning." They arranged to meet Buck again 2 nights later, but he never came. They found his body the next morning at the bottom of Widow's Canyon. "Another accident," Roxy said grimly. "He knew the risk," Jax replied, his eyes hard. "Died trying to do what's right. We won't let that die with him." They hid the notebook in Roxy's flower bin and worked from there, verifying entries, finding witnesses, slowly piecing together a case strong enough to bring Cross down. But Cross struck first. Jax was in the barn when he heard May scream. His blood froze. He dropped his tools and ran for the house rifle in hand. Inside, Flint Red stood in the lamplight, a knife pressed to May's throat. 2 of his men held Roxy between them, her wrists pinned. "Evening, Creed Red," said voice slick with malice. "Here's how this goes. You fetch that notebook and any other little secrets you've got, and then you all take a nice ride with us." "Let them go," Jax said quietly, his voice steady but cold. "Your quarrel's with me." "That's where you're wrong," Red sneered. "You all know too damn much now." He tightened his grip on May, making her whimper. "The notebook now." Jax's mind raced, searching for any chance. Then he heard it hooves fast coming up the trail. Red's eyes flicked toward the sound. "Seems we're running out of time," Red said. "The book or the girl bleeds." "It's in the kitchen cupboard," Jax said evenly. "Behind the dishes." Red jerked his chin at one of his men. The outlaw ran and returned moments later with the notebook. Good, Red said, flipping through it. "Now we—" The barn doors exploded inward, filling the air with splinters. Clay Boone and Reverend Gage charged in, rifles drawn with a dozen armed neighbors at their backs. Gunfire erupted. In that instant, Jax moved like lightning. He struck Red's knife hand hard, the blade clattered to the floor as May wrenched free and bolted for Roxy. Red went for his gun. But Jax Creed was faster. The 2 men crashed against the wooden wall, fists flying in a blur of fury and desperation. Flint Red was heavier, broader through the shoulders, But Jack's creed fought like a man with everything to lose and someone to protect. They grappled across the floor, boots scraping the sounds of chaos and shouting outside fading into the background. Then a gunshot split the air. Red froze, eyes going wide. He looked down at the dark bloom spreading across his chest, then back up at Jack's, disbelief twisting his face. You shot me, he rasped. You laid a knife to my little girl's throat, Jax said evenly, voice low and cold. Red swayed once, twice, then dropped to his knees before pitching forward lifeless before he hit the ground. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then the barn erupted. The dust. Creek folks shouting orders, guns drawn, rounding up the surviving Iron Riders, who threw down their weapons the instant they realized their leader was gone. Reverend Gage stepped forward, voice ringing out. Self-defense. Every man here saw it. Red held a knife to a child. The words cut through the noise, anchoring the moment in law and order. But the storm wasn't done yet. One of the captured riders, desperate to save his own neck, began to talk. It was all Cross's doing, he babbled. The burnings, the threats, even the killing of those holler boys he gave every order. Gage's eyes narrowed. You willing to testify to that? The outlaw nodded furiously. Just keep me alive long enough to do it. Across the room, Roxy Vale was on her knees, holding May tight against her. The girl trembled, but was unharmed. Jax knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around both. It's over, he whispered, his voice breaking. You're safe now. May looked up at him with tear-bright eyes. Is he dead? Yes, sunshine, Jax said softly. He won't ever hurt anyone again. Good, she said fiercely, and then the dam broke and she sobbed into Roxy's shoulder. When the dust settled, Gage approached Jax, nodding toward the old ledger tucked under Roxy's arm. That notebook, the one Martinez died for, we'll need it for evidence. It's yours, Jax said, handing it over. There's enough in there to bury Harlan Cross twice over. With witness testimony, Gage asked. More than enough, Jax said. Then the federal marshals will take it from here, Gage replied. You did good, Creed. Those instincts of yours saved lives tonight. I'm no lawman anymore, Jax said quietly. Just a rancher protecting what's his. The marshal smiled faintly. If you say so. But if you ever want that badge back... Thanks, Jax interrupted. But I already found where I belong. When dawn came, the smoke had cleared, and the Vale Ranch stood quiet under a bruised pink sky. The nightmare was over. Harlan Cross's hold on the valley had finally been broken. His men scattered, his crimes laid bare. Roxy stood beside Jax and May, watching the sun rise over their land, their home. What happens now? She asked softly. Now we live, Jax said. We raise cattle. We raise that girl. We build something worth keeping. Together, May asked, her small hand clutching his. He smiled, meeting Roxy's eyes over the child's head. Together. Always. And just like that, the war was done, and a family began. Spring came early to Montana that year. The meadows turned green, and wildflowers spilled down the slopes like spilled paint. The ranch thrived. New fences lined the ridges, the rebuilt barn gleamed in the sunlight, and laughter filled the house where once there had only been silence. 6 months had passed since Flint Red's death and Harlan Cross's arrest. Federal marshals had ridden out, gathered testimony, and hauled the land baron away in chains. His empire crumbled in weeks. His stolen deeds voided his lands, returned to rightful hands. On one bright morning, Roxy stood on the porch watching Jax teach May to rope. The girls' tosses were getting sharper by the day. Like this Papa May called sending the lariat spinning through the air. "Perfect sunshine," Jax said with a grin. "You'll out-rope me before summer's end. I want to rope a real calf next time when you're ready," he said. "All things in their time." Roxy smiled softly at the phrase it had become their family's quiet creed. Healing hope. Love each had come in its own time. Clay Boone rode up, then waving an envelope. "Letter from town," he called. Jax opened it and frowned at the official seal. But as he read, his expression shifted from worry to stunned disbelief. "What is it?" Roxy asked. "It's from the territorial judge," Jax said slowly. "He's ordered restitution from Cross's estate. Payment for the barn, the damages. For everything. Enough to keep this ranch safe for years." Roxy took the letter with trembling hands, her eyes widening as she read the amount. "We could hire more help, expand the herd, maybe even build that school for the valley." "We could," Jax said, then added softly, "We could do a lot of things." That evening, after May had gone to bed, they sat on the porch beneath a sky full of stars, dreaming aloud of what was to come. The money meant possibilities, but it was what they'd built together that truly mattered. "Saul always dreamed of this," Roxy murmured. "A ranch that would last for generations." "He'd be proud," Jax said. "We'd be proud," she corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." He took her hand. "Roxy, there's something I should have said a long time ago. I wanted to wait till the danger passed." She turned, breath catching. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because you need me, but because I love you. Because May loves you. Because we're already a family in every way that matters, and I want to make it real before God and every soul in this valley." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Are you sure I can't give you children of your own?" He smiled. "You already gave me everything. You brought May back to life. You gave us a home. You showed us that even on hard ground, love can take root and grow." He cupped her face in his hands. "You are all I want, Roxy Vale. All we want." Her answer was a whisper carried on the soft Montana wind. "Yes, yes," Roxy whispered, through tears, her voice trembling with joy. They were married on a bright May morning, the kind of day when the Montana sky looked like a polished sapphire, and the wind carried the scent of spring grass. The whole valley came out to see it, the Dust Creek folks, the Red Hollow folks, ranchers and drifters alike. May Creed walked ahead of them as the flower girl scattering wild petals with fierce focus. She wore a soft blue dress that Roxy had sewn herself with matching ribbons woven through her braids. "Do I look pretty, Mama Roxy?" she'd asked that morning, her voice full of hope. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Roxy said, smiling through happy tears. "Like an angel come down for the day." May had grinned. "Good. 'Cause angels ought to look nice for weddings." The ceremony was simple, but true, held under the old cottonwood by the creek. Reverend Gage read the vows, his deep voice carrying over the quiet crowd. When Jax Creed kissed his bride, the cheering was loud enough to startle the cattle half a mile away. Clay Boone, standing as best man, clapped Jax on the shoulder. "'Bout damn time, friend. We were starting to take bets you'd never get around to it." The celebration rolled on into the night. Long tables groaned under the weight of food from every neighbor's kitchen. Roasted venison, baked pies, cornbread, and jugs of cider. Fiddles and banjos filled the air while children ran wild through the dusk, chasing fireflies and barn cats alike. May led the pack, laughing louder than anyone. As the sun bled into the hills, Reverend Gage found the couple on the edge of the dance circle. Got some news for you two, he said, handing Jax an envelope. Justice has been served and there's more. The territorial council's looking for folks of character to act as local magistrates, people who know the land and the law. You interested Creed Jax looked down at his new wife, then at May, who had run up holding a captured firefly between cupped hands. He smiled. Thanks, Reverend, but no, I've got everything I need right here. Fair enough, Gage said, grinning. The offer stands. Later, when the music quieted and the stars began to spread across the sky, the little family sat together on the porch steps. May's head rested against Roxy's shoulder, heavy with sleep. Are we a real family now? She mumbled. Jax brushed a strand of hair from her face. We've been a family a long time, Sunshine. Today just made it official. Good, she murmured. I told Billy Stevens that Mama Roxy was my real mama now, but he said that don't count unless there's a wedding. Now I can tell him he is wrong. Roxy chuckled softly. You tell him whatever's true and whatever's kind. I'll just tell him I've got the best parents in the whole Montana territory, May said sleepily. That's true enough, Jax whispered. The neighbors drifted home with full bellies and promises to help at summer roundup. The ranch quieted. Children were carried, sleeping, to wagons, lanterns winked out, and peace settled like soft dust over the land. Years passed, and the Vale Ranch prospered. New fences stood strong, new barns gleamed beneath the sun, and laughter filled every corner of the house. May grew tall and sure, riding as well as any ranch hand, and carrying her mother's steady heart. She kept her birth mother's picture on her dresser, but never doubted who had raised her. Roxy Vale was Mama, in every way that mattered. More children came, though not by birth. Strays, orphans, and runaways found shelter at the ranch one by one. Roxy and Jax took them in, fed them, clothed them, loved them. Before long, the once quiet homestead rang with the chaos of a big, happy family. Remember when it was just the three of us? Jax asked one evening as they watched the children chase lightning bugs in the yard. I remember being lonely, Roxy said softly, thinking I'd never be whole again. And now I can barely count them all at supper time, she laughed. Saul always said this land needed children's laughter. Guess it just took time to find the right ones. All things in their time, Jax murmured their family's old motto. As night deepened, they called the kids in. The usual whirlwind followed, washing faces, finding pajamas, stories, songs, giggles that refused to die down. May, now 13, helped with the younger ones, patient and kind. You'll make a fine mother someday, Roxy told her, tucking a blanket around a sleepy child. I learned from the best, May replied simply. Later, when the house finally quieted, Jax and Roxy sat together on the same porch where he'd once stood as a stranger, knocking for work. Did you ever think, he asked, when you opened that door, that this is where we'd end up? She smiled faintly. I thought I was just hiring a ranch hand for the winter. I never imagined I was opening the door to a whole new life. Any regrets only that it took us so long to find each other. They sat in peaceful silence, listening to the night sounds of their land, the soft lowing of cattle, the rustle of barn cats in the hay, the faint breathing of their children above. I love you, Mrs. Creed, Jax said as he did every night. And I love you, Mr. Creed, she answered, as she always would. The moon rose silver over the Montana range, painting the world they'd built together, a home, born from struggle, grief, and grace. It wasn't the life they'd planned, but it was the life they'd earned. From sorrow came joy, from loneliness, family. From one desperate knock on a widow's door came a love that would outlast the frontier itself. and in the morning there would be coffee chores and laughter, simple blessings of a life fully lived. For now they simply sat in the quiet two souls who had found home in each other's arms, grateful for second chances and the courage to say yes when love came knocking. All things in their time. And their time was now and forever enough. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.